Coming to you guys with data through the end of March here in this beautiful spring market we're experiencing. And then we're going to talk about, sort of peel the curtain back about some of the things. Listen, we all know the world seems to be filled with scams and spams and fraud and all that kind of stuff. What does that look like in real estate? We want to peel the curtain back and tell you what we're seeing on the front line, areas and things that you might need to be mindful of, possibly concerned about, and maybe take some action on. So first of all, let's get after the data through the end of March. Number of new listings up in the marketplace by about 16%. So again, we're seeing that springtime effect a little bit, but also just a continuation of maybe getting back to more normal times of inventory. Number of pending sales down about 3% from where we were this time last year. Closed sales down just about the same. Days on market just inching up a little bit. We're just getting close to about average of 70 days on market as the average. And we always talk about monthly housing supply. We're really squarely in a balanced market, right between a 3 and a 6 month supply of inventory. We're right at 4.7 months supply of inventory. So pretty good active market, honestly. Monitoring micro markets, as we've talked about, pixelization of the market, that sort of thing. Some places super hot, others a little bit cooler, right? So let's talk about, let's kind of get after the main topic today. Talk about sort of peeling the curtain back, the onion back about what's happening with fraud, misinformation, et cetera, in real estate, what you as buyer prospects, seller prospects need to be mindful of. One of the ones, let's just go out to one that really sort of irritates us, is major conglomerate websites. Let's name a couple: Realtor.com, Zillow. There's many, many others that get the data feed. That is the accumulation of all the data that agents are keying into our MLS and then pushing that out to those websites so that they'll display that information for people to take a look at. The pet peeve is they're not very good custodians of that data. So let's kind of go through a couple of examples of what we're seeing on that in terms of maybe even on the buyer side. Some stories about where we've heard some buyers that have talked about seeing something on Zillow that doesn't check out on our side.
Right. I mean, Zillow and Realtor.com and all of those sites, there's a bunch of them out there. Mm-hmm. And like you said, they're picking up the data feeds from the MLS, so they're getting it secondary. And then what do they pick up and what don't they pick up? Mm-hmm. Discrepancies in items like size. It could be even year built, year renovated. There could be discrepancy. Bedroom, bathroom counts they seem to be off all the time. Yeah. Other pertinent information like what are the fees to live in a neighborhood? What are their POA fees? Things like that. A lot of that data that Zillow has picked up or Realtor.com has picked up in the past, it's not accurate anymore because that's always changing. Mm-hmm. And so unless they're getting the updated feeds of that information, they're getting that wrong as well.
Well, one of the things that it seems to me we see is, we go off that old adage, trust but verify, right? And so we sometimes see with buyer prospects, they'll be in touch with one of our buyer agents and saying, hey, listen, show me that listing at 123 Main Street. I just saw it on Zillow. When we go closer to the source, which the original source is the MLS, that property's been withdrawn, it's under contract, and in some cases, it's already sold and closed. So you get some inaccuracy there. They're not good custodians of that data. The other thing is that, as you pointed out, sometimes they're not loading up or displaying all the data that goes into the MLS. So you made a good point about that. So square footage in our MLS auto-populates from the county records. When you key in 123 Main Street, it shows it. But that property might have been expanded.
Yep.
They might have had an addition done, and that's not reflected in the county records for whatever reason. In our MLS, we get to put in approximate square footage. So that's good information for the agent, for the buyers to know, hey, listen, what was there originally is smaller than what's there right now. A lot of times websites, and this could be across the board to some extent, won't have a space to populate that data point because it's less convenient. It's not as conforming. Take Zillow or Realtor.com. They're displaying data from every county in the entire country. So they're trying to fit everything into one format. And sometimes that means that things need to be left off, right? So we ask agents and buyers, like, go after the data. If you see something, don't necessarily be surprised that there may be inaccurate information. Don't necessarily be surprised if what's displayed on those websites is old information, and you got to get it verified by what the current source is.
Yeah, we see it all the time. And it's, I think having somebody that is tied, that's a member of the MLS that can go in and actually look at the data and make sure that it's right. I think that's going to be super important for anybody to do. And it's right there. We have it. We have access to it. And again, those secondary sites they're getting the feed after the fact, and they're behind. And so and I don't even know how often they update.
That's the other point, is getting behind. How are, as custodians of the data, are they drawing that hourly to make sure it's updated? Are their systems updated and staying current? That's the real concern. Sure. If you're using that as your primary source, which a lot of people do use those sites as a primary source, just make sure that you're always keeping in mind, I better verify that data before you take action based off of it.
Yeah, and if you're a buyer and you're looking for good properties, I mean, how many times have you heard when a buyer calls their agent and says, I want to see that property, but it's under contract? And the reason is because when it hit the MLS, whether it be in listing delay, which we've spoken to in the past, or something like that, and it's sold immediately, by the time it gets to the secondary sites, it's already under contract. And that's frustrated a lot of buyers, because they watch those sites like it's the Bible, and it's not.
Well, that's a really good point. Just to anchor that point on listing delay, that status in our MLS is not visible, what we call above the cloud line. Like, basically, it's only broker to broker.
Yeah.
That is not part of an IDX, Internet Data Exchange feed. That's not going to any of the sites. So if you're actively looking and you're wanting to know what's the newest inventory that's coming to market, normally there's a checkpoint of properties hanging out in listing delay before they go there. That's a great point. And why? Because they're not ready to go to full market. They don't have their full photo set or descriptions or whatever the case is. They wouldn't present well online. It doesn't mean they're not real.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. We just sold one last night that never made it to the open market. So by the time the one we sold last night, the listing that we had sold last night, it's Zillow, it's going to be sold.
Right. And it'll show 0 days on market. Let's talk about other real or not real. This is one that we see, again, behind the curtain. And there have been some really challenging stories on this. We're seeing scammers that are attempting to list undeveloped land. So just say like a home site. And what they're doing, and this has been happening over the last handful of years, but what they're basically doing is they're going and identifying, hey, here's a piece of land, doesn't have a house on it or a villa on it, et cetera. So it's easy to them from a distance, act like they're the owner, contact a real estate agent, say, hey, I want to sell my lot over at 123 Main Street. And the agent unwittingly says, oh, great, I'd like to market that property. They have a conversation. They act like they know the property. They don't have to meet on site because there's really nothing to see, no key to unlock. And that process can go through to them signing a listing agreement, the agent taking it to market, a buyer's agent getting interested in it, a buyer and that seller signing a contract, it going to the closing attorneys, and you just pray that a title search and some good due diligence at that moment blocks it from going to a closing. I don't have it verified, but I heard it rumored that one did go through closing, and I don't even know what that looks like. But so hopefully the process now, as people learn that scam has been happening, you start going back up that line. And now what we do, it's really neat to see, is the local MLS is putting out an alert. Guess what? There's someone that's trying to scam on lot 123 Main Street. We see that as a notification that comes up in our MLS when we log in. And so we're trying to capture that and stop it earlier on in the process.
And the good thing too is some counties, I know Beaufort County is doing this, but you can sign up with your county. Not all counties are doing it right now, but you can sign up with them and they can do a property monitoring service for you. There's no charge, but you just say, hey, I own this particular property. And it doesn't have to be a vacant lot. It can be a house.
Right.
So if anything comes through their office on that, any changes, anything, you'll get a notification of that. And I think especially for vacant property owners, I think that's super important. And if your county doesn't do that, then have somebody in the business that monitors real estate daily. Just keep an eye on it for you.
Yeah, 100%.
Pay attention.
Great advice. And so that is advice to any lot owners out there. And again, one of those things, trust and verify. If one of those listings were happen to slip through, the buyer agent needs to be diligent on doing some verification information there just to make sure that we're dealing with a legitimate listing with a legitimate owner. Talking about legitimate, last item on that is wire fraud. A big situation, globally, internationally, et cetera. And locally, where it hits real estate, it's really tricky. So, and we've seen an instance of this just recently, just 2 weeks ago, we had a client where this happened. But basically that process looks like this, is that you've got these scammers that are basically trying to figure out, how do I get something for free? How do I steal something? And what they're doing is they're targeting. So let's say that you've got a property under contract. You're excited about it. Maybe you do a social media post. Oh, so excited to be buying 123 Main Street. We're going to close in a couple months. There's a world of scammers that are out there. They're looking for that sort of activity. Then they perform this phishing, PHISH activity, where they're basically trying to get you as a target to tie into an email system, campaign with them. If they do that and they get into your email system, guess what they're doing? They're monitoring your emails with specific regard to the transaction that you've put out in the world, saying, hey, this is happening, to see if they can intercept engagement between you and, let's say, the closing attorney or maybe the buyer agent, et cetera. If they can do that, then they can manipulate the responses back on that at the critical moment, like wiring, hey, here's my wiring information. This is where I need money sent, or this is where I'm going to send money from, et cetera. That's where it gets really, really slippery. And so it's one of the reasons that I think all brokers, certainly we have been for a long time practicing, is we don't provide wiring information. That critical moment where money is being sent from a buyer, from their lender into the closing attorney, not only do we not provide that information on behalf of the attorney, we ask them to do it directly, and then we recommend anytime that you're providing wiring information that you're getting on the phone and verifying that with the entity that you're talking to, which is that closing attorney, to avoid that kind of situation.
Chip, that is so important. That phone call can save you so much headache, because these scammers have gotten better and better at making emails look legit and websites look legit. And you really need to get on the phone and you need to talk to somebody that you've already established and you vetted out and you have that relationship. Now, some people are doing business with lenders that aren't local and they don't know who's on the other end of the phone. So then you got to be extra careful in those situations. But if you're working with a local lender, if you're working with a local attorney, we know who they are, your agent knows who they are, and you can get on the phone and talk to them. You instigate the call is another thing, as opposed to receiving the call. So those are things just to pay attention to. And I know this is just not fun to talk about, right? Because you never want to talk about the scary things of an industry. But this is happening, and people are getting hurt. And we just need to just educate as best that we can, and we need to pay attention to what's going on.
It's that trust but verify kind of component. Increasingly, we always say, there's a few bad apples kind of ruin the batch, and that's sort of what we're seeing, is that all of a sudden we're having to become that much more cautious, precautious, and careful, and taking proper steps to make sure nobody gets burned, nobody has hassle, nobody has more stress than they're already prepared for in their real estate transaction. And that is part of our job. So guys, hopefully that was helpful for you, and we'll talk to you all soon.